I welcome you all to the plenary titled In Conversation with Shri Rahman, Gender Inclusive Development Amidst the COVID-19 Pandemic. Senator Shri Rahman is the parliamentary leader for Pakistan People's Party Senate, as well as the party's vice president. She is the chair of the Foreign Affairs Standing Committee in the Senate of the chairs of Pakistan People Party Committee on Foreign Affairs. She is also the founding chair and serving president of Jinnah Institute. She is the fourth term parliamentarian, diplomat, journalist, and civil society activist who has received Pakistan's highest civil award, the Nishan-e-Imtiaz. Ms. Rahman, the former editor of Herald News magazine based in Pakistan, is also an award-winning journalist with 20 years of experience in both broadcast and print journalism. Shri Rahman has served as leader of opposition in Senate, Pakistan's ambassador to the United States, and Federal Minister for Information and Broadcasting. She has held additional portfolios as Health, Women Development, and Culture as a Federal Minister. Ms. Shri Rahman has received several awards, including the title of Democracy's Hero, the Freedom Award for her work for media independence, the International Peace Award for Democrats, and the Jane Kirkpatrick Award for Women. Identified as one of the top global thinkers of 2011 by Foreign Policy magazine, she was cover titled by Newsweek Pakistan as Pakistan's most important woman. Her latest book, Women's Planning, navigates modernity, politics, and activism in Pakistan through prism of 22 women activists, leaders, and academics speaking in their own voices. She has also co-authored the book 500 Years of Kashmiri Shawl with Naveed Jafri, which was published in 2006 and was awarded the prestigious R.L. Shep Ethnic Textiles Book Award from the Textile Society of America. For a formal moderation role, I would request Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri, the Executive Director, Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Dr. Abid Suleri has also been appointed as Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Member, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and National Convener for the National Committee of Agriculture Transformation Plan. Over to you, Dr. Abid sir.
Thank you, Wasif. Respected Shri Rahman Sahiba, ladies and gentlemen among the audience, many more who are watching us on Facebook Live, SDTV Live page, and on Zoom link. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending from where you have logged in and from where you are participating in this session. It's a special pleasure to host this evening plenary with Shri Rahman, whom, of course, Wasif gave a long introduction. But for me, the most important introduction is that she heads a very important think tank, Jinnah Institute, and she tries to contribute not only through the Senate, but also through the thinking community. So we take her as part of our thinking community. Just before starting, I think my team miscommunicated. So Sherry went to a wrong hotel. So that's why she was late. Otherwise, she was bang in time. But it was some sort of confusion during the team's coordination. Now, before we start this session, and the format would be, I'll just try introducing this book, because this is the, after reading it, we got this inspiration to have this special session in our Sustainable Development Conference this year. So I'll just give a brief intro. Then I'll request Sherry to set the scene through her talk. And then we will have an interactive conversation. And I'd encourage the audience, both online as well as those who are present here in person, to raise the pertinent questions. Now, the theme of our annual conference this year, as you could see, it is about thinking beyond pandemic. We know that perhaps we need to now live to learn with Omicron and all the crons that would appear in 22 and may keep on. So we have to live with them. So beyond pandemic, how can we think of leaving no one behind? And when we talk of leaving no one behind, one very important segment, 51% of society is women and girls. So any sustainable development goal, any millennium development goal, any development goal, be if it's bang on target, if we are not taking care of 51% of our population, we are actually leaving them behind, and we are lagging behind in achieving sustainable development. And that's a topic we gave Sherry to speak to, and she would be definitely educating us on this topic. But now coming back to this women's women planning, and I wrote an op-ed for the news some time ago. I'll just share with you the introductory paragraph of it, and then of course it would be Sherry and the audience. So I wrote that Women's Planning, edited by Senator Sherry Rahman, is an anthology of thought-provoking essays written by some of the most remarkable women navigating activism, politics, and modernity in Pakistan. The essays are by and about pioneering women, women who struggled and inspired, women who suffered, women who liberated others from their suffering. There are women who dreamt big and surmounted impossible challenges. There are women who had to put up with serious consequences for standing up and speaking up. There are women who lost their fight. There are women who waged wars on various fronts for their rights and left behind legacies of feminine valor. This book has a number of enchanting snippets from the life histories of Pakistan's daring women, whose commanding voices have had far-reaching impacts. Apart from stories of valor, there are philosophical debates about the women's rights movement, including its epistemological foundation, semantic overtones, and taxonomy. And I concluded it in these words. If you are offended by Aurat March placard or are a misogynist, I suggest you read all 22 essays to cut your inflated male ego to size. I would highly recommend this book if you want to understand why we will not be able to achieve sustainable development goals without gendered policies and practice. So this was the small intro, so I'd definitely invite you to go through these essays. But this was just to set the scene. And of course, now I'll request our honorable guest for tonight to say a few words, and then we will engage in an interactive discussion. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, girls, friends. My apologies for being late. There was some miscommunication. Punctuality is next to godliness for me. So without much ado, I want to thank Mr. Suleri, Abid Suleri, and the SDPI for always bringing and convening important conferences on subjects that are not always in the headlines and need to be addressed I think, regularly, as well as by policymakers. So I've been asked to speak on a gender-inclusive development plan or policy amidst the pandemic. Well, clearly we're still in the pandemic because it never seems to quite go away. And I really want to say a few things about what lies behind the headlines. To me, and I think to many of us, the impacts of any crisis are never gender neutral. And of course, COVID-19 with its new inequalities and forced reckonings is no exception. Most of the dehumanizing effects of amplified discrimination don't make it to the headlines, and women's sufferings are often a private monster that is shoved under the bed in the light of a family's urge to save its face or its honor, as they like to put it. Yet we know how acute the fragility has become as brutality and now even beheadings seep into the public domain. both in India and Pakistan. I read of a horrific story about a beheading in India today, where a mother held down the legs of her daughter who had married by her choice. The brother took part in a ritualized grisly beheading. I couldn't see it, of course. And in Pakistan, we've heard of the Noor Muqaddam case. These may be isolated incidents, but we need to take note of them as extreme acts of barbarity that should send us some signal to examine where we're headed and what we're doing wrong. Any society that doesn't do that is going to find itself in serious peril, further peril. So I think we need to go beyond the symptoms and the sensational stories that draw on a collective vein of horror. We take palliative action, we demand justice, there are hashtags for that justice, and they do have an effect. But after a while, the band-aid falls off and we move to the next crisis, like we're doing today. This morning, you may have heard of the Islamabad controversy, and they made it into a controversy. My point is, the women, if they were stealing or wrongdoing, these crimes don't equate anybody becoming subject or victim to public shamings and stripping naked. That just isn't the law. And this business of mobs taking the law into their hands needs to be looked at. We also have Sialkot, the Sialkot murder. I don't call it incident in our midst. And we need to be thinking about where we're going as a society and what is it, what are the structural and social inequalities and constraints that are leading to such horrors. It can't just be that overnight people have become barbaric. Pakistan was not this way, or at least should not be this way, and we need to look at why we're moving in this direction. Perhaps the economic and social reasons I offered to you are not enough, but I think we need to look at them for our own sakes. Personally, I think the need to focus on mega trends putting Pakistan and its women, of course, at risk is imperative. Today's divisive discourse obscures the need to focus on what drivers are pushing the country into dangerous polarities of inequity, where vulnerable communities are on their own with little to protect them from daily deprivations of food and shelter insecurity, which is very high, let alone communities that gather into violence, either in the street as mobs, privatizing justice, or family members within the home. Sustainable development, in my view, is not an easy sell. I commend Mr. Suleri for continuing to keep his focus on that wheel, because, you know, other than multilateral conferences and pious claims of reaching goals that international donors might want to look at, people don't really want to look at where we are in terms of actual achievables, and its deficits are compounding every day to create the real tsunami hitting us if we don't plan against it. Whether it is existential meta trends like the pandemic or even climate change, women and minorities are at the heart of both dispossession as well as violence. This is not endemic only to Pakistan. But as far as violence is mapped, it was identified globally as the other silent pandemic. Domestic violence was mapped as the silent pandemic, which reared its ugly head during COVID-19, where 3 out of 5 women were documented as experiencing violence at home. That's a very high number, and it includes Western democracies. In these statistics of global shame, because they really are that, Pakistan did, of course, poorly. Data suggests that violence went up by 200% in just early 2020 when the pandemic first hit us and the lockdowns were jamming homes closed, when a virus flattened the world and all human protections against such disasters went into black swan mode. Humanity did not know what to expect, did not know how to plan, and the panic and anxiety that this generated resulted in violence at home and frustrations being vented within the four walls of inequity. And I think we heard very little about it because at least Pakistan's helplines went silent, most of them. And they're acknowledged to have gone silent because there was no one to man those helplines. People were in lockdown. And what we know is a veritable tip of the iceberg. So the statistics are disturbing. Meanwhile, then, what are the big risks to Pakistan as we enter the next decade and century of these borderless contagions and national challenges? The first is Pakistan's demographic time bomb. We tend not to look at it and we don't really give it importance, or because it's a very substantive issue and it needs to be looked at every day, I would think. With a stated population growth at 2.4%, we are now entering a period where we are the handful of countries in the world to prove Malthus's pessimism right. Instead of Bangladesh, which has pulled up its governance socks, as you know, and bested us in lowering its population rate through a growth targeted policy, Pakistan is on the verge of multiple development crashes, magnified on the rocks of economic growth, actually falling lower. It did fall lower than population growth projected until a few weeks ago at 2.4%, although today the claims of growth are at 3.5. Both are conservative estimates and they demand a rethink of public policy planning. What is important is that population acts as a multiplier on other social and economic deficits, making it the single largest stress inducer on creaky infrastructure, declining jobs, and diminishing resources. Right now, we have a new person born in Pakistan every 8 minutes. We neither have the infrastructure, the jobs, the space, the food, or even the water for so many people. What are we thinking? Are we giving this attention? Is this why social unrest is going? It's one of the stress multipliers. Since 1998, our population has gone up by 57%. Now, since 1998, that's not so long ago. These rates are completely unsustainable. Had our population trends resembled Indonesia or even Bangladesh, we would have had 40 million people less in poverty. 40 million people less in poverty. That's 20 million women less not being beaten or educated or given food or healthcare when the money runs out, which it has. The money has run out in households as well as in the treasury. Given that 60% of Pakistan is now food insecure, is the systems upgrade needed, software update needed, not worth the public time and attention? Is it not? Should we not be thinking and talking about it? I don't see it anywhere in the public discourse. Our reproductive health system needs an upgrade with contraceptive prevalence at 35% only through a revision of strategy, both at home and at the national and community level. The lady health workers programs, for instance, need resources, but instead they are often seen as unemployed and contractually hanging by a thread. And the last time they got resource surpluses was in 2010. Whereas, again, lessons from Bangladesh suggest big-scale campaigns involving religious scholars, involving school curricula, and the television pulpit are needed to do the real heavy lift on this subject. Of course, it's not getting the attention. And as it stands, 48% of women have little to say about their healthcare or reproductive decisions, with female mortality being extremely high. 55% only have access to healthcare, and COVID lockdowns have disrupted that, even this poor statistic. Now, we will hear more about it later when some organization has documented what happened to women during COVID. Women have to be allowed to be 18 before they marry or bear children. I mean, that's a given, but this is not a law in Pakistan. This needs to be a law. Right now, it is only law in Sindh. It needs to be a law everywhere. And when we try to legislate, it meets the bedrock of resistance in the great National Assembly of Pakistan. Every hour, a woman dies in childbirth. Every hour. Actually, 1.4 women dies in childbirth in Pakistan because they don't have access to their own health care and reproductive choices. They don't have access to choice making power. They are married off when they're immature and they're dying, and so are their children. Therefore, I feel that the messaging against this has to be loud and clear, not ambiguous, not conditional. Families need to be small, they need to be healthy, educated, and working and productive. Right now, 1 million young people enter the job market every 5 years. I think the figure is very low. It is much more than that. Only a very robust economy growing at 8% can provide jobs and shelter for its people at these rates. And our youth cohort is 65% is under 35. They're all entering the job market. With our economic goals leveled forever at macroeconomic stabilization and further indebtedness, high interest rates and declining manufacturing, no focus on the agri sector, which used to be exporting wheat while we had a surplus at home. No number of magic international investments or silver bullets or even under CPEC will create these jobs. It won't. Tied to the it will create some jobs, but you've got to create a base at home. And that is just not being done as we speak. And then tied to the population alarm bell is the climate stress danger. Either by the pandemic or climate change, women remain disproportionately impacted. They carry the water, they nurture the home, they bear the brunt of income loss or less food in the home. In the last 2 years, for instance, Pakistan has moved from the world's 7th most affected country by climate change to the 5th, moving very fast on that index. And that's not good. Irrespective of our global carbon footprint, our vulnerability is high to rising temperatures and extreme weather. This is not some abstract science or film for the future. It is a reality that impacts both citizens and state in escalating quantums. Last year, Pakistan recorded the highest level of heat in the world, in the little city of Jacobabad. This year, globally, Turbat was the hottest city in the world. Do we know that? Heat-induced deaths, droughts, and crop reductions are causing lower agricultural yields than a decade ago, while our glacial melt triggers flash flooding combined with every monsoon. Air quality in Pakistan's cities and villages has given to Punjab now what we call a fifth season, the season of smog. Instead of waiting for India to stop burning tires or crops, we need to protect our people from what they have in Delhi called the black lung syndrome. By taking timeline steps to convert, we can convert big industries and big emitters to clean fuel tech. And the brick kilns, some of them have the zigzag technology and converters, but we're not paying attention. There's no public conversation. Fuel imports and vehicle exhaust systems have to upgrade to Euro 5 levels, but no public conversation. Instead, we hear everybody will be driving an electronic vehicle. I mean, fine, that's an excellent goal. That's something that India has committed to by 2030. But right now, you need to at least start converting your fuel emissions, your vehicle emissions, your old trucks and rickshaws and everything else to Euro 5. That's not happened. And we can't overnight, we're not rich enough to convert to electronic vehicles. Everybody can't. Where will you be charging them? Will there be enough stations? So you know that if these goals are an ambition thrust on us by the big fossil fuel polluters who are being unjust to us, we know this. But we still have to look after our people. We still have to protect our populations, which I don't think we're doing. Again, I want to point at water. Water at zero is Pakistan's other very big looming crisis, not a public conversation. Women are at the heart of the resource depletion crisis. As according to UNICEF, it is women and girls that globally spend 200 million hours every single day collecting water in both agri and urban ecosystems. So while there's a general public discussion on adapting to urban water deficits, they have little or no resonance in policy agendas nationally, except at COP meetings or international forums. That's it. Governments and communities both need to understand the stakes here, especially for the poor and the marginalized. At this point, only 20%, only 20% of Pakistan has access to clean drinking water, while the rest consume fecal and industrially contaminated toxins. Lead and arsenic are now endemic to the Indus Plain, while our per capita usage of water is, wait for this, the highest in the world. We are the largest per capita users of water. We waste it like it's an endless planetary resource we are entitled to. It's not coming endlessly. It's not a universal resource anymore. And we need to seriously wake up to this, and so do our governments. Now, according to the UN, not some fly-by-night data creator, Pakistan will officially be water scarce by not some distant century, but by 2025. What are we doing about it? By 2025, you'll be like Cape Town. You know what water rationing means. Water pricing, water rationing. It will have to begin, and there will be conflict and scrambles for water. And there will be more frenzied fights, and people will act out their bestialities and brutalities, and we'll all be asking, oh, have we become this? Have we become that? When communities don't have water to drink or food to eat or jobs, they become angry. Everything is not about identity politics. They weaponize religion. They are given religion constantly as a diet, but it's not filling their stomachs. And religion has its own place, but it cannot be weaponized. And it is being done. It is being done over here. You've seen the results. So, given that Pakistan is principally glacial fed, unlike India, which is monsoon fed, we are not in a position to just afford what I call a policy of strategic drift. We are just drifting. It's like nobody's hand is on the sustainable government development wheel. And water is what powers our homes, lives, agricultural economy, everything. Yet it is agriculture that consumes most of our groundwater and poor sanitation that contaminates our drinking water. Women run an undocumented care economy as well as agri-economy in Pakistan, with only 27% of the female population documented in the formal labor force. Just for perspective, men account for 81%. Whereas everybody knows women are working from morning to night, perhaps a dual shift or a triple shift. Their work is not monetized and they're not formally in the labor force. So, coming back to that, without water, societies will face conflict as well as unprecedented hardship, where, like all front lines of vulnerability or fragility, women and children will face the first brunt. There can be things done. A policy change by governments to incentivize crops that consume less water is needed urgently. That's a first step. In sugar, wheat, and rice, for instance, we export our virtual blue water in spades. We're exporting our water when we export these commodities. And if the rapacious British Raj, whom we've grown to vilify, could build Punjab, the largest man-made irrigation system in the world, why can't post-colonial governments focus on some structural needs instead of just hot-button topics? Seriously? We can't do that. Our failures, I'm not criticizing any one person. This is a collective failure, and I'm part of that. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, governments have to act. It is not civil society's responsibility alone. Civil society can certainly do this, can certainly raise awareness, can draw up policy agendas, can start involving the public in broader conversations, and start bringing some sanity to our daily messaging. But that is the limit of what civil society can do. No country has been reformed by only civil society. Transformational change comes from governments. That is it. And the best transformational change comes from governments who are in alliance with its people, not against them, who are in alliance with its opposition, not against them, and who are aligned with broader forward goals for even a medium term. Right now, what needs to be done is a simple consensus created via parliament. We don't have a presidential system, which is actually very hard to work for creating consensus. Look at the United States. Every year they're in gridlock. They're just so rich that they can manage to survive that parliamentary gridlock. But Westminster style parliaments have a built in mechanism for creating consensus. They run through that. And the job of a sitting parliamentary leader, which is always the prime minister, the leader of the house, is to create that political capital that allows him or her to build constituencies of serious change. Whether it's the 18th Amendment you're moving, or whether you're bringing women life householders to head your income support program, like the Benazir income support program. I'm only coming up with two big things we did in our government, and I'm sure others have done too. I'm just still looking for them by consensus. Or you create a 4-day parliamentary joint session, not to bulldoze bills, but to build a consensus in which a joint resolution comes out, and your country starts a prolonged series of military operations, kinetic operations, on what we call a battle and a front line against violence and terrorism. And Pakistan has fought that for very long. Pakistan has fought that and actually degraded violence and terrorism, militancy and terrorism in large swathes of Pakistan, including Al-Qaeda. And people have forgotten about what it was like in 2009, 2010. Every day we were seeing terrorist attacks, bombings on schools, on Sufi dargahs, on our military installations, on our ships, on everything possible. That's all over. Every time you put the television on, you saw a new attack. That's all over. All hail to Pakistan's law enforcement and military and civilian leadership that created that joint consensus. I was there. It was 4 days of it didn't take rocket science. It did not take rocket science. It took 4 days of a closed door session and a lot of political capital amongst us. Why can't we do that against violent extremism? Shut the doors and we can do this. But you have to have the will and the need to feel the need to reach out to parliament and to use it. Right now, that doesn't exist. And we are not in any shape, I'm sorry to say, to build on a new narrative of tolerance, of change, or disrupting hierarchies of patriarchy that create a culture of widespread discrimination, misogyny, and intolerance for not just women, but all citizens of Pakistan who are vulnerable and seek rights or seek equality, let alone power. That's a far cry. But why should we set the bar so low? We have a right to seek personal economic autonomy. We have a right to define our own identities, and we have a right to seek political, social, and personal power. And with those words, I'm not going to carry on, but I do want to say one thing. Without common goals connecting the resource and capacity dots to create resilience, Pakistan will not be in a position to mitigate, let alone manage the upcoming crises. And there are many. The problem is that, especially after the pandemic, even in global indices, what are they saying to us? They're saying that Pakistan's progress on SDGs, on where women stand today, have all slipped. We are the sixth most dangerous country in the world for women today. That's not a good statistic. In South Asia, we're 6 out of 7 with only Afghanistan behind us. That's also not a good statistic. You can argue till kingdom come that that's an unfair estimation, But look around you. What does it look like? Not happy days for the girl child, right? So reaching SDG 5, because Abid Suleri wants to stay bravely focused on SDGs in a time of only sensation and headlines that increase your heartbeat. SDG 5 is gender equality. That itself is a goal. But even if we look at the structural context and not just the all important rights framework, estimates suggest that if women's participation in Pakistan's economy were anywhere close to equal to men, it could add as much as 30 to 60% of our GDP just by 2025, the same time you're going water scarce. 30% is the World Bank's estimate, 60% is what some private companies estimate. So, just as a practical proposition, if you mainstream women into the economy and monetize their work, you're going to have a bump in your GDP, which you're desperate to achieve, but you're not looking under your nose. The disparities are very real, and they lead to Pakistan's extremely low ranking on the Global Gender Gap Index as the world's third worst country in terms of equitable division of resources and opportunities among men and women. So the worst division, third worst. In fact, it is all SDGs: poverty, zero hunger, reduced inequality, peace, justice, strong institutions, education, all will be impacted by the gender gap. If 51% of Pakistan is facing daily discriminations, they are facing violence that they have never witnessed before, income deficits, no amount of putting down, and no ability to exercise power either inside the home, use an income, or exercise it outside the home, then none of your wheels will turn. If 51% of your population is outside the development wheel, that wheel will not turn. It's simple logic if rights don't appeal to you. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Sherry, for setting the scene. If I can request one of the organizers to replace this, it must be cold now. Sure. Okay. Thank you for setting the scene. And of course, you will have a lot of questions in your mind, which I will definitely get an opportunity to discuss. But to start this conversation, and of course, if I can try summing up your discussion in one-liner, it's all about social justice. And this improved social justice, eliminating social injustice, it is ultimately a political process. And I think no strategy will succeed if it ignores the fact that it's a political process. So do you think that our polity, as it today, is taking care of this lack of justice when it comes to gender policies, when it comes to gender policy implementation?
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear, or is this mic close enough? Yeah. So I think that the question you ask is all important. Most people have a public recoil from politics because they see it as a game of attaining power for the sake of power and various other perquisites that go with it. Politics is not about rent seeking. It has to be about seeking social justice and some norms of flattening social pyramids for people. And I think what is important here is to stop pretending that it can be done without policy tools that involve politics. I'm very grateful you bring this up, because politics is the art of making the very impossible at least doable. And the very impossible today becomes totally doable tomorrow. It's just a question of saying, I will step down and reach out to you. It is no rocket science. It's done to death by the most mediocre leaders in the world, and it is entirely possible. Right now, we are in a place of total political binaries. And that trend is running, unfortunately, globally. It's not benefiting anybody. Strong economies can survive it. But even Joe Biden has to reach out and say, well, I'm trying to heal America. And he has to say that I have to go past the post-Trumpian order. I don't think there's a post-Trumpian order or is a post-Modi order. We have the same binary politics fueled by hate, division, and a constant investment in creating an otherization of those who are not in your tribe. So if I'm not in a journalist tribe of one wing of, say, journalists, then the rest are to be otherized, not put, not brought into a framework of inclusion where we can agree to disagree. There is no framework left for agreeing to disagree anymore, which has created a culture of deep intolerance. It messages from the top to bottom impunity for anger as a daily communication practice norm, and so anger is normalized, and with anger comes violence very close behind, and that violence is becoming normalized. People now expect to hear the total opposite when one statement is made. I mean, I was at a committee the other day and I said, well, it was about the sexual harassment bill. There was some attempt by the minister to broaden the term. And since I had helped, I mean, I actually initiated the 2010 sexual harassment bill in our government. I understand that over the years, we've seen deficits. People who are not in organizations, formal organizations or institutions, have no recourse. So who do they appeal to? There are no committees since there's no organization. For that reason, we had created the Ombudsman, Women's Ombudsman. So I said, yes, well, you've got to expand the ability of a person who's working online or who's working independently. It could be even a movie star, but is not part of an organization. And if she or he is facing harassment, that definition should be able to include them. People were like, "Oh, you are agreeing?" I said, I'm on the side of the law and providing social justice. It doesn't matter who's proposing this. And this was our law. It's been 10 years. Society has grown, it's evolved, and so must the needs of the law change. So we've got to, we've got to frame our arguments in terms that don't exclude. But right now, I want to report some hope. That's a few individuals, but I see no capacity in those that are sitting in power, no capacity or even interest or inclination to use parliament to effect real consensus for change. And without consensus, you cannot have structural, social, cultural change, which you badly need right now. You saw what's happened in Sialkot. You badly need structural change. It happened before with a Christian couple. It happened with Mashal Khan. You need that cultural change, and you need everybody standing behind you from different stripes of the political and religious and social spectrum. For that, you've got to have political capital, both personal and institutional. I don't see it.
There no hope for agreeing on a minimalistic agenda in the parliament?
Who's going to make it happen? Every time we're called to a National Security Committee, which is always the highest forum of a sensitive policy making that puts Pakistan in the crosshairs of risks and challenges, it is the army chief who runs the meeting because the prime minister does not wish to come to the meeting. I don't wish to say more and vitiate your atmosphere. It's not a TV show.
Thank you. And, in your book, your own essay, the parliament percentage, token or substance, the common perception is that women who come to parliament without contesting election, perhaps they are just there in order to meet the quorum requirement. But you have very ably highlighted some of the success stories, and I would like you to share some of the crux of your essay with the audience here.
Well, I'd really like the audiences, so they're all educated people, to read that essay. And much better essays than mine are in the book. My introduction may be even better, but there are absolutely I'm shamelessly peddling the book, but there are very serious writers here who have skin in the game. The one of the criterions for choosing people writing in this was all women who across generations have had skin in the game, who've had to make choices and give up their comfort zone and come out, speak out, be counted, pay a price also. Many women have paid that price. So, and I felt that it was time for my generation, which is older. I came in with Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto Shahid as a MNA in the parliament on the women's quota. Today, I've been both leader of opposition in the Senate and not just of women, and various other jobs. I don't hold a token job, either in parliament or in my party. And okay, it's a testament that my party does like to send up women in decision making positions if we have the talent and the ability, the capacity, and the education. So I think it's not just a. I think that quota, if you like, there was a time has really paid dividends. In 2002, we came in large numbers, 17 to 21%, and that 17% actually did the documented business of the house to 73%. While the men came in with their entitlement, the women were doing the work. And they also revolutionized the discourse. Since that day, since that year, I mean, it was not just me alone, it was entire constituencies and communities of change, including women's groups and civil society who used to be so active, including people like Austerity. They were there in the galleries, they were offering us legislative support. Those were heady times. We were in serious opposition, but we did a lot of work. I remember moving 5 bills, one after another. One changed the Hudud ordinance. You don't even hear about it today because it's gone. And all those things were happening. The human rights discourse was transformational for that parliament. It has never left the public sphere every single day. This country is talking about rights. It's been mainstreamed. It is now politically very costly to go against the rights of that are enshrined in the constitution. So, which was not the case before. I mean, there was a story I remember where one of the women were burnt under the hudud or not burnt. They were being for reporting adultery, for reporting rape. You were criminalized as an adulteress. That was just that followed. That was the hudud ordinance for you. And there was a case of a blind woman who had been raped, and she was reporting. She had to report that rape, obviously, and she was being under the Hudud ordinance, she was down as an adulteress. I remember Iqbal Haider speaking about it in the Senate of Pakistan. I was a journalist at that time. And he was shot down by the chairman of the Senate at that. Can't do that. You cannot do that. No chairman of that Senate will be able to shoot down that discussion. There'll be an uproar and people will be compelled to speak. But even if he does shoot it down or she shoots it down, it will go outside the house. It will go into the media. It will go into the social media. And so things have changed. And I think it's those women who made that parliament percentage, who made that change. It's very undersung and underappreciated. And people actually question. Somebody today even said, what color of lipstick are you wearing? I mean, I got up and I left. I said, I'm not going to put up with this nonsense. There is still sexist talk constantly in the house. And I feel that we should not be afraid to stand up and say, well, I will make waves if you make the slightest comment. There are red lines and those cannot be crossed. And I hope younger women have the hope and the courage to do that. Our job is to provide that. And part of the book's project is to bridge an intergenerational divide. I felt that younger women, who lead the Aurat March, they do a tremendous thing. And
but the whole movement festers out after a few days of marching, and then they have reprisals. Of course, we help them and we are part of them. But today's women are facing a double burden of the same structural patriarchal misogynies we faced, whether it's from the religious right or from just men being privileged men, whether they want to keep you out of clubs because you're a woman at the top elite or at the bottom of the ladder where you're being abused because you've married of your choice. So all of this is still there. And then you have the online world, which is extremely predatory. It's turned out to be extremely predatory for young women. They have used it as a platform to pitch for change and become, entrepreneurs, become leaders. Democracies have used, obviously, the internet, but the digital world is like everything else. It has a very dark side to it. And the dark side is that women are facing predations. Teenagers are almost questioning their life's worth and value. You hear of suicide, hear of all kinds of things. And there is no regulation. And I'm not suggesting the state be a regulator, but it's the big platforms that are pushing through sometimes content that is extremely predatory for vulnerable people. And women are facing that too. Now everything is lived as a real time, everything is digitally experienced. You haven't lived if it's not a photograph, if it's not on Facebook, if it's not on Instagram, it's not happened, it's not really experienced, is that sense. So, the AI world, the digital, the fourth industrial revolution has actually also created a new host of problems for women. They get stalked, they get predated, people say disgusting things. Women withdraw, become less and less forthcoming. I've seen so many that I've DM'd and said, don't, just don't walk away from this. You need to ignore this if you must, but stay there, hold the course. Don't let others define your space or agenda. I don't. Why should you? No less, So it's like that.
Thank you. And I think the next question that comes in mind after legislation, yes, laws are made, but then how to actually get those laws implemented? We talked of polity, we talked of political parties, we talked of parliamentary system. And of course, in Pakistan, we have excellent laws for almost everything, even for cyber trolling, to how to prevent it. Yeah. But how to get those laws implemented, which could favor and which could empower women?
So I'm not sure the cyber trolling laws are actually good. They've been exploited routinely by even the regulator itself. And there's a whole jury out on that. And we need to have, it's a complex issue, of course, you're right. It's a very complex issue, but they're not necessarily optimal. Laws are a work in progress, but when laws work, it's like the war on terror, we forget about it. When it's actually working, you don't even know about it. That is fine. That is just fine. That's how civil and just societies, civilized societies work. The Hudud ordinance is working. Women are not sitting in large numbers. The revised Hudud ordinance, it's gone. They're not sitting in jail because they were reported rape, or someone said she's been raped, and that's it. You've been raped, and you're now also an adulteress because 4 male witnesses have not testified to that rape. So if 4 male witnesses were sitting there testifying to that rape, what were they doing? They were enjoying the show or what? So why would 4 male witnesses testify to rape? They would not. I mean, it's not adultery. It is. So there was a condition, heinous condition created. Many black laws like that were repealed and actually worked. Even the sexual harassment law actually has been working very well, particularly in the private sector. By very well, I mean, if a law works even in the 40%, that's the increment all lawmakers all over the world work for. And you need to work for that, because that 40% is better than zero. I would say even that 1% is better than zero. And also, the first thing you need to do is provide the state backing. If one woman feels she can go complain about domestic violence because there's a domestic violence law, That means it will be state versus state standing with XYZ, Fatima Rahman, a random name, or Shay Rahman, versus the complainant, versus the person I'm complaining about. And the state has to be with me. So that's a very big thing. That changes slowly in the increment if the media runs campaigns. And sometimes media houses do run awareness campaigns on how to use laws, and to me I feel that is one of the most effective ways of activating a law. A lawmaker's job is to make a law and to keep revising a law when it's reported as becoming ineffective or not responsive to social changes. But it's not our job to not make the law because it's not implemented. You still have to make the law. You still have to have that on your side. And then that's where civil society comes in. It's your job also to say, okay, this law is working. I'm going to tell you how it works, or this law is not working. It's really doing badly, and let's do something about it. The media picks all this up, and the media has been a great partner. It's been terrible in most ways, but it's been a great partner for gender supportive laws. Many of the main channels have been quite good in reporting cases, have been pursuing them. Okay, they forget the headline. The nature of the beast is such that tomorrow morning you forget what happened yesterday. That's how international news is everywhere, right? But some try to follow up, and even that initial reporting activates a constituency. People look around. Then of course the digital medium can assist a law. You can, everybody's a video journalist now. You've got your camera, a smartphone, you've made a thing, you report it. Justice has to be done. 5 people start crowdsourcing and 500 people start talking about it. Justice has to just be done. And that's how civilized societies work. So you use all instruments you can. And of course, lawmakers should pay attention to rule making attached to laws, which we don't, by the way. There are rules always attached to laws, which help move the law along and make it responsive to public needs. I mean, for instance, why we created the Women Ombudsman, there's a committee within an organization. Now I'm working with a PIA case. The committee is actually working against the victim. Naturally, because the committee are 3 top people, they're covering for each other. This is human nature. It goes on and on. That's how power works. That's how oligarchies operate. So I immediately saw this law and I said, no. This is not good. The committees are not going to work. They will, most of the time they might work, but 40% of the time they will become the oppressor too. They will collude with each other. That's how corporations, or at least private corporations, right? But private corporations are actually using it better. Their code of conduct is operating better. And it's the public companies, corporations that are really, really messing around. And we have to constantly pursue cases. And that's why the ombudsman's job was created. Everybody said at that time, oh, you're creating another layer. I said, women don't want to go, or vulnerable people don't want, if they've gone to their committee, the committee hasn't done justice. It's very hard. You're probably fired or ostracized in your organization. It's very hard to go to the court then. Court kacheri, kaun jai, and you know how long justice gets delayed in Pakistan, therefore it's denied. So create a middle layer where it's easier to obtain some justice. So there are laws that work, there are laws that are not working. I mean, we have to do what we can.
Thank you. I know our audience would have many questions, but I'm on my second last question. And that is about the media. You see, Pakistani dramas, they pitch women against one another. I hardly see any drama where they can show female solidarity. Of course, if I can ask you from your media background, is it just the commercial appetite? Is it what society wants to watch? Is it that is actually happening and that's why it's being highlighted? So why can't we show female solidarity through our entertainment channel? So if I look at 7 to 11, half of our population, they are watching talk shows, all the partisan things. or they are watching these dramas where the constant fighting, domestic fighting.
अब इसका मैं क्या जवाब दूं? मैंने ना plays write किए हैं. That's one part of media I've not been involved in. I've just been involved with news media, I'm afraid. But there, I'm very conscious of what you're saying, and these are very powerful symbols. People respond to cultural products and entertainment in ways that we don't even realize. They're actually ways to get messaging and change internal life. So it's a very important question, which is why I have an essay in here. One of the best essays is by Fifi Haroon, who has been a cultural, has been reporting on, since I was editor Herald, she used to be holding that, doing that part for us, TV. And I really had no time. Even today, I'm not able to watch most plays. I do some exceptional ones, but I still see women often cast as victims again and again. I see very few powerful women, and then when they're powerful, you're right, they are either rolling up the ladder behind them in Margaret Thatcher fashion, or they're actually working against younger women who are seeking, who they feel insecure about. So, and of course, then there's the whole mother-in-law, Saas Bahu situation that goes on in all of South Asia. Even in it's even more caricatured in the Indian entertainment space. But I think some of it is a reflection of reality. Some of it is indeed a reflect. I mean, I can't, because I'm a woman, I can't say that all women have been excellent or perfect, or all men. No, there are men who are partners in change, who have stood up for to speak with us, who have actually again paid a price and continue to. There's yourself, there's most of our women colleagues here, men colleagues here. But of course, there are women who, like men, they're human beings. There can be a dark side to every person. So let's not pretend or gloss over or put this burden on women. They've all got to be perfect. No, bhai. They're just like anybody else. And yes, I still think that there are plays in which women can show more solidarity. But I think what the playwrights are trying to do is stereotype women further, which to me is very worrying. They could promote a lot of change. And somebody actually wrote an article which I was very interested in. The Pakistani commercials today, advertisements, are showing the opposite. And I actually took time to watch, because that's, when early morning you can watch some, or late night. And yes, the commercials are taking are showing women sharing, middle class women and men and wives, husband and wives sharing the tea making and in the kitchen. So the stereotypes are being broken. There are many such. Somebody is doing the laundry, somebody's helping at work. So the gender is being bent here and there. There are no fixed roles being forced. Men and women are not being forced into fixed identity and roles as they are in the plays. So what the plays are doing, the television commercials are doing the opposite. It's very interesting. By and large, you still see, a cricketer telling 50 gleeful women how to wash clothes with a detergent, which I find ridiculous. I mean, he should just wash the clothes himself. It's ridiculous. I even wrote it. I said, listen, this detergent, I don't know what the, kaun sa detergent hai wo ji? Jo सर्फ एक्सेल है, कौन सा, आई डोंट नो. मैंने कहा ये आपको ये क्रिकेटर की जरूरत है कि लेक्चर करे किस तरह कपड़े धोने? दिस रिडिकुलस. So I think they changed their campaign. But we should call out people. I mean, I'm not going to, if we go outside our house or we live somewhere, Mr. Suleri, I tell my husband, you've got to iron the clothes. I'm not doing it. Tough. And he's like, acha phir kuch nahi ho. Maine kaha nahi hoga phir. I mean, far be it that we iron their clothes, they should be ironing ours. After years and years, these are the costs and reparations men have to pay. And equality and justice begins at home. Get your brother to iron your clothes, not the other way around. Get your husband to iron your clothes, not the other way around. My husband was here 2 days ago speaking with you. Ask him who irons the clothes. And right now he's in the pandemic. I wrote this book. He started to cook. He's become a great cook, by the way. And yeah, no, I'm happy to be the victim of his experiments. But so I said, look, I'm busy. I'm going to finish this. This is where I got the time. And he learned to cook. So we've evolved a great but I'm not saying everyone has that, but there are ways for people to find satisfaction and not be fixed in their roles,
And the last question that I have is
still has questions.
It's
मैं आपको खाने पे लगा
that was
दूंगी.
second last. That was second last. This is the last one.
Now it's going to.
This is the last question. That is about role of donors and funders in this feminist movement. There's one school of thought that thinks that they did more damage than they did any good, because the whole stigma and taboo attached with the NGO walas, it came with them. The other school of thought, they keep on saying that if those were not initiating this type of discussion and work, perhaps we could not have been here where we are today. So what's your opinion?
Very, very good question, and very, very in-house development world question, but of great interest to me, because I saw a lot of organizations and sisters who were big activist leaders. When democracy came, a lot of people then we didn't need to be every day on the street and being put in police vans and going. So I became a journalist, and then I became a politician. So I stayed in a different fight, and you always had to be in an active one. But I do miss a lot of my colleagues, activist colleagues, who are extremely brave women who keep paying the price. Unke to baal safed ho gaye, and they have to do their work. So donors of one kind were actually very good in creating space for work, for reports, because your state wasn't giving you anything, to actually build databases for women, वगैरह. So that was very good. But there was an element that I felt destroyed parts of the activism. Okay, the links with the grassroots. And I won't name an organization. It was such a vibrant, active, wonderful organization. Every day we were dealing with them. They would phone us, अच्छा ये हो रहा है, शरीफ भी लोग ले आए, हाँ. हम उनसे पूछते थे, अच्छा भी does this legislation look good? No, they would bring legal experts. We would sit together. We did such amazing work. So they got a lot of money. I don't know how many $1 million, and you've never heard of them since then. So एक तरह से तबाही donor भी create करता है. And so stay away from the donor that drags you down in their agenda and drags you down to become what should we call it, contractor, if you like, of their plans. So stay away from those donors. But the donor world is shrinking anyway. The benevolent donors that let you drive your agenda, those are welcome, I think, and they are the ones that support open societies and public conversations like this. They obviously must be valorized, but again, given the way the world is and the resource shrink everywhere, it's become more and more difficult for donors to adapt and grow, and repressive states and authoritarian intrusions are not tolerant of such donors also. Because you're challenging a lot of things, right?
Yes. Thank you very much, Sherry, for this very candid discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause.